The Ukrainian armed forces' offensive ended in failure. The Russian army is encircling Sudzha and has advanced to Malaya Loknya. Good day, dear friends. Today, January 7th, I want to wish all my viewers of the Orthodox faith a bright and joyful Christmas. Now let us discuss what happened in the Kursk region, its purpose and implications. We'll also touch on other front lines. Let's get started by looking at the maps. Before we begin, I would sincerely like to ask you to subscribe to the channel. Your subscription helps support its growth. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed. So friends, a few words about the Kursk region. The main question everyone is asking, what exactly was this? Let me remind you that on January 5th, the Ukrainian armed forces attempted to launch an offensive in the Kursk region. They moved out from the village of Cherkasskoye Porechnoye and advanced eastward toward Khutor-Berdin and the village of Novosotnitsky, with the main goal of reaching Bolshoye Soldatskoye. Ultimately, all their attacks failed. Right here, near the approaches to Khutor-Berdin, 3 waves of assaults were reported. According to the Russian Ministry of Defense, around 4 tanks were destroyed, including a German Leopard and a British Challenger, as well as 1 Ukrainian fighter jet and several other vehicles. Yesterday, on January 6th, further Ukrainian offensives were anticipated, and another attempt was made from Cherkasskoye Porechnoye. 6 armored fighting vehicles advanced in the same direction toward Khutor-Berdin. However, in the fields between Cherkasskoye Porechnoye and the Khutor, 2 vehicles were destroyed, while the others turned around and returned to where they came from. Cherkasskoye Porechnoye, that was it. The Ukrainian armed forces did not engage in any more activity yesterday, prompting the question, what was the purpose of this? I explained this in detail yesterday, but I'll clarify again. The Ukrainian armed forces had a minimum goal of capturing this entire area: Berdin, Novosotnitsky, and Bolshoye Soldatskoye. Their main objective for January 5th and 6th was to bring these settlements under control, establish a bridgehead, and then move in additional reserves to continue their attacks in multiple directions. This strategy mirrors their actions in August 2024, when they initially captured Sudzha, established a foothold, deployed infantry, and expanded their territorial control from there. The goal this time was the same: take Bolshoye Soldatskoye, which is comparable in size to Sudzha, and use it as a launch point to expand their control in multiple directions. Their main target was the highway to Kursk. So what went wrong? The answer is quite simple. The Russian forces didn't retreat or panic. This is the key reason. You might be surprised, but it's a fact. The entire calculation of the Ukrainian command hinged on Russian troops fleeing. Think about it. All the Ukrainian armed forces' successes have only occurred when Russian forces voluntarily retreated without a fight. This includes the Kharkiv region in 2022, Kherson, where Russia withdrew without any battle for the city, and the Kursk region in 2024, where Russian troops also pulled back. However, when the Russian forces stopped retreating, the Ukrainian armed forces began withdrawing, and the Russian army gradually regained control over these territories. Whenever Russian troops stand their ground, the Ukrainian armed forces face problems. This was evident during the 2023 counteroffensive, when many expected Russian forces to break and allow a breakthrough to Berdyansk and Melitopol. However, Russian troops held their positions, and the Ukrainian armed forces only managed to capture the village of Rabotino, if we simplify the situation. The same applies here. The Russian troops didn't waver. They destroyed about 20 pieces of equipment, captured 23 Ukrainian soldiers, and that was the end of the Ukrainian momentum. On the contrary, the Russian army began its own offensive. Russian forces launched offensives in several areas, starting with this same region. From Nechayevo, they advanced toward the line of Malaya Loknya and Russkoye Porechnoye, covering over 3 kilometers yesterday and halting here, parallel to Russkoye Porechnoye. Further developments are expected today, as Russian forces may advance into Russkoye Porechnoye. From there, it's clear that attacks will target Cherkasskoye Porechnoye. Additionally, Russian troops were observed entering Malaya Loknya yesterday, engaging in successful assaults from Novoivanovka toward Leonidovo. As a result, Russian forces drove Ukrainian troops out of Leonidovo. Perhaps the most significant event occurred in the south, in the village of Makhnovka. Yesterday, I mentioned that during the recent offensive on January 4th, Russian forces managed to capture 40% of the village. Yesterday, their control expanded further, with Ukrainian forces now holding only the northern outskirts of the village. If Russian troops fully capture Makhnovka, it will mark the beginning of battles for the city of Sudzha, which is expected to happen by the end of January. The fighting for the city of Toretsk is also intensifying. Russian advances within the city are described as remarkable, acknowledged not only by Russian sources, but also by Ukrainian ones. For instance, Deep State caused alarm yesterday, reporting 3 separate advances by Russian forces. 1. In the Famika district, where they advanced 300 meters, despite operating in urban terrain with Ukrainian positions situated on higher ground near the Toretsk mine. 2. In another section, advancing 340 meters toward Terekon number 12th, Russian forces also reached the northern outskirts of the city. 3rd, by evening, Russian troops advanced to the western outskirts, driving Ukrainian forces out. Currently, Ukrainian troops control only a small portion of the Famika district in the northern part of Toretsk. At this pace, Toretsk is expected to fall under full Russian control by the end of January. Pokrovsk direction, January 7th, encircling Pokrovsk from the west, to understand why both the Russian and Ukrainian armies are deploying reserves en masse to contest relatively obscure settlements like Novovasilievka, Solyonoye, Uspanovka, and Volchye, one must examine the defensive lines constructed by Ukrainian engineers. These defensive lines are extensive, but they have a critical weak point in the aforementioned area. Ukrainian analysts themselves acknowledge this vulnerability, particularly regarding the key, well-fortified stronghold south of Volchye, which Russian forces captured without resistance. This stronghold was pivotal in connecting defensive lines and was deemed crucial. To regain control of it, Ukrainian forces have already lost several battalions. If Russian forces manage to capture Udaknoye and Kotlino, both strategic locations for reserve accumulation, the Ukrainian defenses will face open fields, making it easier for Russian forces to encircle the Pokrovsk agglomeration from the west. This explains the intensity of the battles for each stronghold and position, as the stakes are incredibly high for both sides. Control of this area is effectively the key to Pokrovsk. If not the only one, then certainly the most important. Current situation. Heavy fighting continues in the aforementioned area, with intense battles for every position where forces can establish a foothold. Chukar, Mirnograd direction, January 7th. Current developments. Yesterday, Russian forces were consolidating gains made the previous day. They are fortifying positions in Yelizavetovka and preparing for further advances from Vozdvizhenka toward the Pokrovsk-Konstantinovka highway. However, attempts to dislodge Ukrainian forces from Baranovka were unsuccessful. Overall, the situation involves regrouping for future offensives. Davrasau, Toretsk direction, January 7th. Why Ukrainian forces are rapidly losing ground in western and northwestern city areas. Reports yesterday highlighted significant Russian advances in the western and northwestern parts of Toretsk. To clarify, Ukrainian forces in this area face a clear shortage of personnel. They cannot maintain a continuous front line and instead establish several strongpoints, such as the Toretsk or central mines. Large grey zones remain between these points, monitored by drones. If Russian troops occupy a building or area, Ukrainian mobile assault groups are sent to push them out before they can establish a foothold. If successful, control is restored. If not, progress is marked on the map. This approach worked reasonably well for some time, allowing Ukrainian forces to hold parts of the city with relatively few resources. However, in recent days, Russian forces have adjusted their tactics, infiltrating multiple areas within the grey zones simultaneously. This has rendered the Ukrainian strategy ineffective. Although Ukrainian forces occasionally succeed in counterattacks, they are generally unable to maintain a stable front line. As a result, Russian forces have been advancing rapidly in recent days. That said, the Russian army does not fully control the city. They have established several strongpoints. As of now, Russian troops have not only reached the last Ukrainian defensive position at the Toretsk mine, but are also maneuvering around it to disrupt its logistics. Jakodzija, Lyman direction, morning of January 7th. Bridgehead on the Zherebets River near Ivanovka. The situation continues to develop in this area as Russian forces focus on consolidating positions and advancing further. Russian forces have successfully broken through Ukrainian defenses west of Ivanovka and captured two major strongholds on the hills. This breakthrough means the bridgehead on the western bank of the Zherebets River is gaining operational and tactical significance. If expanded further, this position could serve as a launch point for an advance toward Lyman, signaling the imminent assault on the city. Kurakovo direction, January 7th. Yesterday, Russian forces swiftly cleared the remaining industrial zone of the city. The Ukrainian troops defending it fought fiercely, but those who managed to retreat did so, while others were unable to escape. Ultimately, this marked a significant victory for Russian forces. The two Russian brigades involved in the operation, the 5th and 110th, along with supporting units, will return to the front lines after a short rest and resupply. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian forces that defended the city are likely to continue fighting with severely depleted numbers, as many Ukrainian units are currently operating at only 25 to 30% strength, as admitted by Ukrainian sources. Replacing them with fresh troops appears unlikely due to shortages. Meanwhile, the 114th Brigade, having replenished its ranks, is regaining offensive momentum. After capturing Shevchenko and Petropavlovka, it has advanced to the outskirts of Andreevka, signaling to Ukrainian forces in the Kurakovo pocket that surrendering the city will not ease their plight. Additionally, the Ukrainian 79th Brigade is reportedly struggling to hold the lower reaches of the Sukiye Yali River, pleading for rotation. Without it, they warn they may lose control of the pocket's narrow opening near Uliakli. From the east, Russian pressure on this defensive line is increasing. Fighting has already reached Yantanoye, which is now being encircled from the north, from the rear, following the fall of the remaining parts of Kurakovo. Similarly, the situation for Ukrainian troops in Dakhnoye has deteriorated. This is partly because the 114th Brigade has captured Ukrainian strongholds on the northern high banks of the Volchya River and is using them to target the Zaporizhzhia-Kurakovo highway, Ukraine's only remaining supply route in the area. This route, once called the Road of Life, is steadily becoming a road of death. Closing remarks. That's the update on the frontline situation for today. I wish you all a good and peaceful weekend and a joyful celebration of Christmas. This is a significant holiday, so spend it with your loved ones, family, and friends. Try to do good deeds today in the spirit of Christmas.